It's good to be here, and this is really neat for me because in 97, our level 1 classroom was in here, but that wall was knocked out. It was just a big, huge room, so I feel like I spent a year in this class. So it's really neat coming back. It looks different. I haven't been back to Sunset since 2009. I came for a homecoming to speak, and I got to tell you, I was telling my wife last night, she didn't get to make the trip, but I called her and I said, this is so cool to be here. And I said, sitting in the auditorium last night, all I could think about was our son who's 25 walking up to get a diploma because Dad graduated. I remember that scene playing out in my mind. So many cool memories of this place. But I appreciate you coming in this morning. A lot of good classes to go to. How can the local church preach the word to everyone? At least everyone in your town, everyone in my town, everyone in our city. You know, in Cabot, Arkansas is a community of about 24,000. And you think, well, that's a small town. It is. But what a daunting, overwhelming responsibility to think of reaching 24,000 people, preaching to 24,000 people the gospel. And yet Jesus would say all nations, wouldn't he? In Matthew 28 and 19. Daunting, overwhelming. How do we do that? Maybe it starts with the local church preaching to everyone in their town, in their city, in their area, and we work inside out. Maybe that's how we do it. Bible studies seem to be more difficult to come by today. I can remember starting out in ministry, and man, we could set up Bible studies. It was just not difficult. And now there seems to be just a distracted people, a busy people, an uninterested people? Are we maybe to have the Motel 6 mindset that says, hey, we'll leave the light on for you. Just come and we'll wait for them to come to us and we'll preach when they come to the building? For the last 12 years, every single Sunday, I've preached to visitors. I mean, we're so fortunate where we're located. There are visitors every single Sunday. Then we had that spell with this COVID thing, right? And it's hit us all. It's hurt us all. Our attendance has dipped. It's been a struggle. But with that, we began doing this online live stream thing, and maybe you're doing that. Is that the answer? That's how we're going to preach to everyone. We're going to do live stream. Well, we're going to spend 2 sessions talking about. I've got 7 things I want to share with you, and I'm not going to get it all in this session, so they were kind enough to give me 2. So 7 things, and listen, this is not to be earth-shattering. This is to give you some biblical, practical things to take home. These are things that I strive to live by and practice and put into my evangelistic outreach. But I want you to turn your Bibles. Let's begin in Colossians 4. I want us to be practical. If you've got thoughts, if you've got comments, I want to hear from you. I believe all evangelistic outreach begins in prayer. I think that's where it begins. In Colossians 4, and I think it's biblical, Colossians 4 verses 2 and following, Paul would say, continue steadfastly in prayer, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. At the same time, pray also for us. Here is an inspired apostle saying, hey, church, please pray for me. And listen to what he says specifically. Pray also for us, Paul, his co-workers, that God may open to us a door for the word to declare the mystery of Christ, on account of which I am imprisoned, that I may make it clear, which is how I ought to speak. So it's amazing that Paul urges the church to pray for him. Here's an inspired apostle saying, I covet your prayers. I want you praying for me, and specifically for open doors for the word. That I'll preach the message as I should clearly. Requesting prayers, teaching the church to pray this way, makes me think we should. It's challenged me over the years that I really believe that all evangelistic outreach begins on our knees. I believe that, and I can tell you, I have, and I'll share some stories with you as we go. It wouldn't be right if I didn't, would it, Wes? We have to share stories. My point is this. I have names even this morning before I left the room to come over here that I mentioned in prayer. God, I'm praying for this person that you'll open their heart, and this person, and this person. And I've got names every single day. And some of those are most of those people are in our area, people that I know, people that I come in contact with maybe on Sunday. But I'm praying that God is working behind the scenes because He does a whole lot better job than I do. I know when I begin to rely on myself and I step out and I think, well, this is not really worthy of prayer, I'll step out and I'll go and I'll preach the message. I've been doing this for 20-something years. I can handle this. And that's when I tend to fail, if I'm honest. But I think all of evangelism begins with prayer. Pray for open doors. Pray for opportunities. Pray specifically for individuals. I want God working on the hearts of people long before I say a word to them. And I believe He does. You believe in prayer and you say, yeah, we're praying for our sick people. And boy, that list is growing, isn't it? But I've often wondered, are we praying for the lost people that we work with? Are we praying for our family members who are lost, that just can't seem to get over the hurdle and commit? Or the people that may show up on Sunday and they may not? Are we praying for them? I want God to be involved in that. So the people in your life, and I know you know some, the people that you want to see led to Christ, I think it begins with you praying for them. I think another aspect of this is pray for opportunities. Pray for opportunities. And here's the thing, if you're going to pray for God to open doors, if you're going to pray for God to give you opportunities, you need to have eyes that look for those opportunities. All right? Because I believe that He will. I'm a firm believer that God answers our prayers. How He wills in His timing. But I believe that He answers our prayers, and I know that you believe that or you wouldn't pray, right? But I believe that our evangelism, our outreach, if we're going to be the church that reaches the world, and that's our call, isn't it? I think it starts in prayer. Someone may come into the office who's hurting. And maybe it's a conversation on an airplane or in a restaurant. But how does the church today preach to everyone? I think it begins with prayer. I want to pray specifically for individuals, God to open their heart, but I also pray for opportunities every single day. Again, the conversation on the airplane, the conversation in the restaurant, whatever that looks like, but I'm going to be praying for those opportunities and God to open hearts. All right, the next one is this. We're still in Colossians 4. We're going to bounce around some this morning, but we're going to stay here for just a second. If we're going to be the church, if we're going to preach the word to everyone, I think we're going to do that, obviously praying for open doors and opportunities, as we said, but by the way we live in front of outsiders and non-Christians. I think this is such a basic, fundamental principle that we totally look over the top of it. It matters how we live in front of non-Christians. It matters how they view us. And if you think they're not looking, I got to tell you, that's just not the case. Boy, they're watching us, aren't they? Colossians 4, 5, and 6, Paul would say, walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best of the time. Let your speech always be gracious. It should be, shouldn't it? Seasoned with salt so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. But if we're going to preach to everyone, I think it matters how we live in front of outsiders. Paul's point is, listen, be cognizant of how you act, how you speak, how you live in front of non-Christians. It matters. It matters what they think of us. It matters what they see in us. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, in verse 12, he says, so that you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one, but walk properly. Live the right kind of life in front of outsiders. 1 Timothy 3 in verse 7. The context is elder qualifications, right? We know this text. Moreover, he must be, speaking of this potential elder, he must be well thought of by outsiders, so he will not fall into disgrace and into a snare of the devil. So he's got to have a good influence on the outside. What's it like to put in a leader in the church and he has shady business dealings in town? It's not going to look good on the church. And people, it's going to be hard to reach people. That's what people are going to be thinking of. You've heard the saying, haven't you? I'd rather see a sermon than what? Than hear one. Yeah, I mean, everybody's heard that, right? But what does that mean? How I live, how I conduct myself. Jesus talks about in Matthew 5 that we're the light, aren't we? That we're salt and we're light in this world. We have influence. And he's talking to kingdom people. Matthew 5 and 13, he says, you're the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out, trampled under people's feet. You're the light of the world, he says. A city on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine. Now listen, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. It's not about us. It's not ever about patting ourselves on the back, and I like what you said, Wes. It's not ever about that. You know, when we're living to let our light shine in front of the outsider, in front of the non-Christian, in front of the one that's doubting, I don't know if I should do this or not. It's not about attention for us so that they'll say, boy, he's a good guy, or man, she's the best. It's to point people to Christ. It's so people will see Jesus in us. But how can we expect non-Christians to want anything to do with Jesus, His church, worship, if we set a bad example for them by the way we speak, by the way we act, by the way we live? Why would they want anything to do with us? Why would they want to sit down and have a Bible study with me or you? Non-Christians, I believe, watch us. In 1 Peter 2, and maybe from a wrong standpoint, wrong reasoning, do they watch us, looking for evidence that there's hypocrisy in their lives. Well, 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 11 and 12, Peter would say this, beloved, I urge you as sojourners, and that's what we are, aren't we? We're just passing through and exiles, to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles, among the pagans, honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day He visits us, on the day of His visitation, when He comes back. But what's He saying? Check yourself. You live right in front of the outsiders. You live right in front of the pagans. Maybe your parents, when you're younger, you come in with an attitude. One of they say, you better check yourself at the door. Or they point, you don't walk in this house with that attitude, right? Heard that as a young man, said that as an older man, right? And that's what we've got to do. We've got to check ourselves at the door. See, what do you mean at the door? When we're leaving the house. We've got to check ourselves. I want to make sure I'm living the right kind of life in front of everyone, but especially these outsiders that are looking and going, should I do this? Should I commit to this? Is there something to this thing? I want to share a few more scriptures before we move on to the next thing, if you don't mind. In Romans chapter 12, another aspect of this, we're talking about just living right in front of the outsiders and the non-Christians. But another aspect of this is we should also be hospitable to visitors and non-Christians at worship. And you know, we think, well, this is kind of a no-brainer. I know. Listen, this is not earth-shattering. I don't intend for these 2 hours to be earth-shattering. I intend them to challenge you so that you can go home and go, well, that's easy stuff, man. We need to put that into practice back home. That's what I want to see. Romans 12 in verse 13, listen to what he says. Paul would write, contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. Showing hospitality carries with it the idea of being kind to strangers. Remember what the Hebrew writer said about that? Hey, be careful. Make sure you show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing, some have entertained angels without knowing it. Hebrews 13 and verse 2. So this idea of being hospitable. Someone comes into your home and you say, hey, let me take your jacket. Would you like something to drink? How about a snack? Can I get you something to eat? And all of that is in the name of what? Hospitality. Because when someone comes into our home, we want them to feel welcome, right? Well, what about when they walk into our church building on Sunday? Do we look at them and say, oh, I don't know if I've met them before or not? We have 2 services in Cabot. And it's difficult. It's like having 2 churches. Ron, I got to move this chair because if I don't, I'm going to fall in a minute. It's like having 2 churches because people gravitate to the one. You know, we've got some folks that go to early church, some that go to second church, and guess what? They don't see each other unless they're in the same Bible class or they happen to run across each other on Wednesday. And so what happens when new people come, which we see that all the time, people are afraid to go introduce themselves. I don't know if I've met you before or not. And they say, well, I've been a member here for 20 years. And that's what scares everybody. And so guess what they do? Nothing. They'll say anything. And I'm not picking on our folks back at Cabot. Some may be watching, y'all. I'm sorry. I'm not picking on anyone. I'm just saying that's a dilemma we've run into. And it's a real problem. I've faced it many times. I've gone up and introduced myself countless times to people over and over. And they say, yeah, I met you last week or I met you last month or whatever. You know, but we've got to be welcoming. When people come into our doors to worship with us, what a privilege that they join us to worship. We need to welcome them. Show them some love. I'll tell you what we did this past fall. Our associate minister and myself, he kicked the series off on becoming a welcoming church. Again, there's not a lot of theological depth to that, I'll admit. But man, is it practical. And boy, do we need to hear it. And even more so, practice it. And I preached the next 3 weeks on becoming a welcoming church. I think it's interesting in 1 Timothy 3 and verse 2. Well, I'll start in verse 1. It says, the saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach. Now, we focus on a lot of those, don't we? I mean, the husband of one wife, got to have the desire, and we tend to want to make that a qualification. But we focus on a lot of these things, believing children, and we push those to the forefront. What about hospitality? We've got to be hospitable. When folks come in our doors, we got to give them a reason to come back. We're interested in you. You are welcome here. We will answer your questions. We will give time to you. We care what your needs are, what your hurts are, whatever the case is, what you're going through. And man, we live in a society, folks, that is hurting. Families are breaking up left and right. As Princeton said this morning, we're looking at the headlines and we're not even fazed by it. Someone walks in and says, hey, you know that couple's getting divorced. Oh, really? Did you see how bad the Cowboys played the other day? And that's kind of the mentality. Why? It doesn't shock us anymore. We're not surprised by those things. We want to be a preaching community. Folks, it's got to start in prayer. And it matters how we act, how we live in front of outsiders and non-Christians. But I'm going to take it a step farther with you. The next one is this. This preaching community, if we're going to reach our community, I think it matters the way we treat our brothers and sisters in Christ. I think that really matters. I don't want to get too far into this, but because this really wasn't the way I was planning to go, but sometimes you get those ideas. Do you ever get those ideas? I don't know if I should say it or not, but I'll say it. So, we focus a lot on the sins, and we say, oh man, this sin is bad and this sin is horrible and all of these things. And sometimes I think what really cripples us in the church is our relationships with one another. We don't put a huge amount of emphasis on that. We don't have an issue if someone hurts us, man, we'll just not forgive them. We'll hold a grudge till Jesus comes back. And that's ungodly and dangerous in and of itself, isn't it? But our relationship, how we treat one another, matters. And people are watching. Again, if they're watching with impure motives, if they're watching to find hypocrisy in us, if they're looking at us, looking for reasons not to become like us, whatever their reasoning is, it's fine. We've got to live right in front of the outsiders. And part of that is this number 3, is the way we treat our brothers and sisters in Christ. I want to go to Acts 2. I told you I'm going to bounce around with you a little bit today. Acts 2, 42 and following. The text, Peter's just preached a barnstorming sermon on Pentecost. Some 3,000 respond and are baptized. And then what you find are these new Christians and their devotion and what they're doing. And yes, verse 42 says they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the fellowship, the breaking of bread and prayers. And we're thankful for that. And that's kind of maybe led to what we do, right? And then verse 43, and awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. Wouldn't you have liked to have seen some of those things? And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And I think that's amazing. They all agreed. There was unity. And even when they didn't agree, they found unity. And you know what that unity did? It prompted them to see one another as they are, family. We're family. And you say, well, we've got our blood family, and then we've got our church family. And I got to tell you, I've had a hard time trying to differentiate between the two. Because my church family is my family by blood also. The strongest, most powerful, purest blood there is, the blood of Jesus. But then that you go on, notice what they do. They see each other as family, there's no doubt. Verse 45, it says, and they were selling their possessions and belongings. They were distributing the proceeds to all, any who had a need. Day by day, not 3 times a week, 4 times a week, whatever. Day by day, they're attending the temple together and they're breaking bread in their homes. These fellowship meals they enjoyed. They received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God, having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who are being saved. And it's no wonder that God was giving the increase. God is the one that gives the increase, 1 Corinthians 3. And it's no wonder that He was, because of the way they loved one another and took care of one another and viewed one another as family. I have said this at home. I don't know how people make it through this life today without the church. I completely rely upon my church family. I mean, everybody goes through tragedy. Everybody goes through difficult times. My family's gone through difficult times. And guess who I rely on? You say, well, you better go to your elders. Well, I do. But I also rely on my church family. And my elders are my church family. You know what I mean. But these folks, these early Christians, they had this family thing down. They're selling camels and whatever their possessions were, because Brother Joe, he has a need that he can't meet. So we'll sell this animal. We'll sell this possession. We'll do whatever to make sure Brother Joe is taken care of. Does that piggyback off what you said, surrendering all? Because really it's not mine anyway. So if I can sell what's not mine anyway to meet my brother's need, I think that's surrendering. And it's viewing. Why would I do that? Because that's my family. 25-year-old son, a 23-year-old daughter, and a 19-year-old daughter. Would do anything for them. My son bought a house this past end of the summer, because I know we were still mowing. So I'm going somewhere with this. and buys this house on a corner lot, so it's got a big yard to mow and all that stuff. He doesn't have a lawnmower. It's his first house. He's young, and he's just trying to find his way, and I'm trying to help him find his way. And I found myself, by helping him find his way, mowing his yard about 3 or 4 times, and which I didn't mind doing that. You'll do anything for your kids. You say, well, of course. I'll mow their yard. I'll help them with a bill or two here and there. He'll call my wife on the way home from work. Hey, did y'all cook tonight? Did you cook? He doesn't say did y'all because he knows I don't cook. Did you cook? And she'll say, yeah, I did. Okay, well, can I come by after work? And she never says, no, Dylan, you can't come by. She says, that's fine. Come on. Why? Because you do anything for your kids. But why can't we view one another that way? And what an incredible example it is when we view one another that way, when we love each other that way. In fact, didn't Jesus say in John 13 that by the way you love each other, people are going to know you belong to me. By this, all men will know that you're my disciples by your love, John 13:35. And so when we're loving one another and we view one another like family, we become so incredibly attractive to the outsider. Because you know what the outsider's looking for? You say, well, it depends on how old they are. No, it doesn't. Do you know what the outsider's looking for? The same thing the 14-year-old kid on the street that is wrapped up in a gang is looking for. He needs acceptance and a place to belong. So it doesn't matter if they're 75 or if they're 25, they want a place to belong. And when they come in and they're going, man, this place, they love each other. This really is a family. Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't need that? I need it. And I desperately want it. How many times have you gone on vacation? When we go on vacation to the beach, a lot of times, I like that. There's a congregation we'll worship with down there. And I love it. They're so loving. They're so friendly. And their attendance skyrockets during the summer. But they do everything they can to be as warm and friendly and welcoming. It's a small building, and they've got chairs literally in their atrium and their foyer because they really grow in the summer. But they're doing everything they can. And you know what? I'm going to keep going there when I'm there on vacation because they're so loving. Have you gone to Walmart? You step up to the cashier, and she's just rude to you. And he's like, wow, what's wrong with her? You don't know what's going on. Maybe she's going through divorce. Maybe she's a single mom. Who knows? But anyway, she's rude to you. And then the next day, my wife calls and says, hey, on the way home from work, would you stop and get some milk? And so I go into Walmart. I grab the milk. Guys, I get carried away. If there's anybody watching from Cabot, my wife, she's going, this is a weekly occurrence. So I stop by and I grab the milk at Walmart and I start looking at I'm looking for the shortest aisle, and I go to the short aisle and I'll see, oh, it's that girl from yesterday. Now I've got a decision to make. And I got to tell you, we're always challenged with, she wasn't nice to me yesterday. Maybe I should go get in another line. I'll wait longer. I'll stand in the longest line because I don't want to go and talk to her and deal with her. We don't know what's happening in her world. But my point is, we're so unattracted by the unloving, by the rude. And that should be a lesson to us. That folks, when the way we live, the way we treat our brothers and sisters in Christ should be nothing short of how we treat family. They are family to us. We attract people by our love for one another, and then we tell them the greatest love story of all. Comments, questions at this point? Let me stop for a minute. Okay, so what we said, I've got one more thing I want to share with you, and then we'll take a break and we'll come back and we'll do the last 3 in the last hour. So this idea, being a preaching community, I'm sharing some basic principles with you this hour, and hopefully kind of get into some nitty-gritty stuff in the next hour. But pray for open doors. I really do. I never seek out a Bible study with someone without praying for them first. And maybe that's a few days, maybe it's a few weeks, maybe it's a few months. And I'm saying, God, just work on their heart. Work on their heart, okay? In fact, I'll tell you some conversion stories here in a little while. And every one of those people, every single one of them, I prayed for them. And you say, well, man, are you bragging? Not at all. I mean, I'm pointing to God. He's the one that does it. But we need to bathe our evangelistic outreach efforts in prayer. By the way we live in front of outsiders and non-Christians, be careful about that in the way we treat one another. We are family in Christ. And here's the thing about family, if we're honest. Family gets on each other's nerves. You know, we do. We do. And we don't always agree. And we get aggravated and we get frustrated with one another. And we don't always agree in the church. And that's okay. Nowhere does it say that you got to agree on every single thing. I know we've kind of adopted that theology a little bit, I think, at times. But it doesn't say that anywhere. There's going to be things we disagree on. And if we agree or if we disagree on some things, we need to agree on loving one another like family. And that will open the doors for us to preach the word in our communities. All right, let's look at this fourth one real quick. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 3. 1 Corinthians 3, verses 5 and following. Actually, I'm going to back up to verse 1. But I, brothers, could not address you as spiritual people, but as people of the flesh, as infants in Christ. You are spiritually immature, Paul says. Fed you with milk, not solid food, for you were not ready for it. And even now you're not ready, for you are still of the flesh. For while there is jealousy and strife among you, are you not of the flesh and behaving only in a human way? For when one says, I follow Paul, and another, I follow Apollos, are you not being merely human? We remember that from chapter 1, the divisions in the preacheritis that existed there. Verse 5, though, we kind of get to the heart of what I want to talk about for the next few minutes. What then is Apollos? What is Paul? He says, servants through whom you believed as the Lord assigned to each. I planted. Paul says, I'm the one that planted, but Apollos watered it. God gave the growth. God's always the one that gives the growth. We never have the right to take credit by any means. God gives the increase. He gives the growth. But you and I, here's the fourth point, must be willing to simply be a link in one's chain of conversion. Just be willing to be a link in someone's conversion chain. You don't have to be the whole thing. You don't have to do it all. Just be willing to be a link. And Paul acknowledged that hey, I planted it. You know, I was a link, I planted. But Apollos came and he watered. It means he continued teaching. And God did what God does. He made it grow, right? You may not be the one who does the Bible study. Maybe you're the one who answers a question or offers encouragement, invites somebody to worship on Sunday. Maybe that's your link in the chain. You may not be the one who actually baptizes them. But you were an early link in their chain that eventually led them to coming to Christ. You know, I think even Paul, if you look back in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, I don't think he felt the need to baptize everybody. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying when I said that. Back up here to chapter 1 with me. We got a few minutes. Yeah, about verse 12, he says, what I mean is that each of you says, I'm in chapter 1, verse 12, I follow Paul, or I follow Apollos, or I follow Cephas, I follow Christ. Is Christ divided? Was Paul crucified for you? Were you baptized into the name of Paul? There was so much division there at Corinth. Probably the first 3-4 chapters deal with some aspect of division. And he says in verse 14, I thank God that I baptized none of you except Crispus and Gaius, so that no one can say, and we're going, wait a minute. What do you mean, Paul? You thank God you didn't baptize any of them? What are you thinking, Paul? I mean, because I'm going to tell you something, and I'm not knocking it, because we understand what baptism is for, and I'll talk about it a little more on Saturday. But that's kind of our staple, all right? And that's good, but let's understand the context of what he's saying here. I thank God that I baptized none of you except Crispus and Gaius, so that no one may say that you were baptized into my name. There's already division there. I don't want you saying, well, I'm following Paul, or I'm better because Paul baptized me and Cephas baptized you. There was that kind of mentality. Once again, in chapter 3, he says what? You guys are spiritually immature. And that's what we see. So I don't think Paul was at all, let's just finish reading and I'll make my comment. I did baptize, verse 16, also the household of Stephanas. Beyond that, I do not know whether I baptized anyone else, for Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel, which is what we're talking about, and not with words of eloquent wisdom, lest the cross of Christ be emptied of its power. So he's not negating the fact that baptism is essential for salvation, that it's an integral part of our salvation. He's not taking away from that. What he's saying is this: my whole calling is about preaching the gospel. The baptisms will come. Now, I'm glad I didn't baptize but a few of it, because I don't want people running around saying they're better because I baptized them. You see his point? He's happy to be a link in the conversion chain. Doesn't have to be the whole chain. The one that preaches, the one that studies with them, and the one that immerses them. So what does this mean? Well, it probably means Paul's co-workers were doing a lot of baptizing. And that's fine. That's great. But acknowledging the fact that he was a link, I'm fine with that. Let me tell you what happened October 30th, Saturday night, October 30th. Now, don't go back and check your calendar and tell me I'm off on the date, because I could be. We're doing trunk or treat at our church that Saturday night. And I'll just go ahead and tell you, because my wife is very proud of it, I was the Beast. And when I say that, I mean the Beast from Beauty and the Beast. Okay, so we're dressed up, we're passing candy, and I can't even get to my phone. It's in this little Beast costume somewhere. And so I get home, and I've got this voicemail from an elder from Wichita Falls, Texas, where Chris Swinford preaches. And I don't know this brother, but he says, hey, I got a guy at the Little Rock Air Force Base, which is 15 minutes from Cabot, where we live. He said, man, can you pick him up in the morning for church? Well, it's 9, pushing 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday night. And so, I immediately called him back, and I said, hey, what's going on? He said, this kid just left Wichita Falls. He's been attending. He's been studying with us. He's not baptized. Man, I don't want him to fall through, the cracks here. I said, I'll call him. So he gives me the number. I call this young man. He's a 23-year-old young man, a great, great kid. You're getting old when you call 23-year-olds kid, right? So I call him and I said, I'll pick you up such and such time at the gate of the base in the morning. He says, that'll be great. So I pick him up. He comes every Sunday, every Wednesday. And just a few weeks back, I was privileged to baptize him into Christ. Now, you see the chain, though. I mean, that would have never happened. He would have more than likely, how many congregations that are in our area? He's in Jacksonville at the Little Rock Air Force Base. We're 15 minutes up the road. But this elder calls me and says, hey, you guys don't let him fall through the cracks. And I appreciate that. That's how it's supposed to work. And they had a big piece of the chain, this link in this chain of conversion. And then it led to this young man being baptized. So be willing to just be a link. And when I say just be a link, I don't want to take away from the importance of that. I think it's incredible when you can play a role. I don't think there's anything more important in life than being a part of someone's conversion story. That's what we're here to do. That's why we're still breathing, so I believe. And then there's Latine. Latine is in Cambodia right now. He left last Sunday for Cambodia. Latine works at our local donut shop 7 days a week. He's probably 40, 41, 42, somewhere in there. His wife and kids are back in Cambodia. And he's been here 7 years in Arkansas without them. which I don't know how you do that. Incredible guy, works every day. So he can't come to Sunday morning because he works Sunday morning. They're selling donuts even on Sunday morning, I know. So he comes Sunday night and he'll come Wednesday night. And so we started studying together. And I studied with him 3 or 4 times. And I got to be really honest with you. I've done Bible studies for years and years. And kind of know how it goes and kind of know what to say. And I was lost because of the language barrier. I think his language, and I may miss this, but I think it's Kai. Does that sound familiar? I think it's Kai in Cambodia. So he has this Bible that has Kai in it and also English. And he's reading from that. And of course, I'm used to zipping through a Bible study and talking about what Jesus did and His love and the death, burial, and resurrection and all these things. And he's getting stuck on one word. And so I can't communicate the whole thought of the passage to him because I'm stuck on a word. And he's just the sweetest guy. And so I studied with him 3 or 4 times and I thought, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Maybe I'm not the one for this. And it was a little discouraging, I'll be honest. Well, then this older fella comes in and I'm old, so he's older. But he comes in and he's a retired preacher and he's there and I love him. And he said, hey, do you care if I try to study with Latine? I think he thought he was going to hurt my feelings. And I said, that'd be great. Because he put it this way. He said, can I study with Latine? I've got more time than you. As if to say, I'm taking this off of you because you're busy. And I said, I wish you would. See what you can do, brother. And he studied with him for quite a while. Last Saturday, Latine was baptized. Charlie baptized Latine into Christ. Just the link. The link. Was I mad? Well, I can't believe Charlie steps up and baptizes. I don't care who baptizes him. I'm just glad he was baptized. And then he gets to go home and hopefully connect with the church there. I'm happy to be a link. Don't put too much pressure on yourself to do it all and close the deal. And it's be the link in someone's conversion chain. In that process of leading them to Christ. Okay, I've got 3 more that I want to share. And I think this is where we kind of get to the nitty-gritty. So let's stop for a few minutes. And we're maybe a little early according to my watch, Ron. But we'll stop for a few minutes. Any thoughts or comments? Feel free to say anything. Okay, let's stop for a few minutes. And I think, what time do we come back? 11? Okay, so you've got a few minutes to do what you want to do, look around, and then we'll continue. I got 3 more things I want to share with you in the next hour, and we'll wrap it up.